The press conference was still happening when they found me. Not metaphorically, literally still happening. The journalists were still at their tables, the cameras were still on, the moderator was still managing the room with the professional efficiency of someone who had done this for 20 years and understood that the most important question was always the one that arrived last. I had just been announced as the recipient of the Meridian Foundation Award, the largest privately funded prize in sustainable architecture, $2.3 million, given once every 3 years to a practitioner whose body of work demonstrated the specific combination of technical excellence and human-centered design that the foundation considered the future of the built environment. My name had been in the room for 40 seconds. I was still feeling the specific, quiet disbelief of a person, hearing something they have worked toward for a very long time and have never quite allowed themselves to believe would arrive. And my mother was at the back of the room. I saw her when the room applauded, when the sound drew my eyes from the moderator to the audience and I scanned the faces the way you scan rooms when you were trying to orient yourself, and there she was. Third row from the back, left side, wearing a dress I did not recognize, sitting beside a man I recognized as my stepfather Gerald, and beside him my half-brother Corey, who was 24 years old, and had the specific expression of someone attending an event he had been brought to rather than one he had come to independently. My mother was crying. Not the polite, compressed tears of someone moved by a public occasion, the full heaving, specific sobs of a woman in the grip of something large. My name is Simone Adeyemi. I am 38 years old, and what my mother did not know, crying in the third row from the back of the room where I had just won $2, $3 million, was that I had been waiting for exactly this moment, not with cruelty, but with the patient precision of someone who has spent 38 years building toward conversation that could only happen on the right terms, and who had, over the past 8 months, prepared for it the way she prepared everything, with documentation. My mother's name is Vivienne. She is 60 years old. She had me at 22, alone, in circumstances she has described over the years in various versions that have one consistent element. The consistent element is that my father's absence was the central fact, and that my presence was the consequence of that fact, and that the relationship between those two things was something she never fully resolved in the years that followed. I grew up in a household that was not defined by cruelty, but by the specific, chronic emotional absence of a mother who was present physically and unavailable in every way that mattered. Vivienne worked. She kept the apartment clean. She ensured I was fed and clothed and attended school. She performed the logistics of parenthood with functional competence. What she did not perform, what she was not capable of performing, I understood later, with the specific compassion that therapy makes available for understanding parents as people rather than as the roles they occupied, was warmth, investment, the specific quality of attention that tells a child they are interesting and valuable and worthy of being known. I had grown up largely unknown by my own mother. She had married Gerald when I was 9. Gerald was a decent man in the way of men who are decent as long as decency is convenient and who become selectively unavailable when decency requires effort. He had his own children from a previous relationship, and the household had reconfigured itself around those children and around Corey when he arrived, and I had become, in the new configuration, a background element, present, fed, accounted for, not quite seen. I had left at 18 for an architecture scholarship at a university 3 states away. I had not left dramatically. I had packed 2 bags, said goodbye to my mother in the kitchen, and driven away in the car I had bought with 3 years of after-school job savings. My mother had said, "Call when you get there." I had called. She had said, "Good." That was the conversation. I had called for 10 years after that, weekly, then monthly, then on holidays and birthdays, with the specific discipline of someone maintaining a relationship that was not reciprocating at the same frequency, but which represented, in the architecture of her own life, a door she was not willing to close. The calls had always felt the way you feel when you are speaking into a space that does not quite echo back. Not hostile, not warm, simply not quite resonant. Updates on my work received with the mild interest of someone hearing about a city they have never visited. Questions about my life answered in the register of someone being polite about a subject they don't find particularly engaging. I had stopped calling as frequently at 29, not from bitterness. From the specific conservation of energy that a therapist I had been seeing for 2 years had helped me understand was not abandonment, but self-preservation. I had built my life in the years of reduced frequency with the full attention that the reduced frequency made available. Adeyemi architecture had been established at 27. I had named it for my father's family. A father I had never met but whose name I had carried and whose absence had shaped me in ways I had spent years understanding and had finally arrived at peace with. The firm was my own thing entirely, built from nothing, shaped by a specific vision of what buildings could be when they were designed around the actual lives of the people inside them, rather than the aesthetic preferences of the people designing them. We were 10 people now, 11 projects in the current portfolio, a profile that had been growing over the past 3 years from respected to recognized. The Meridian Foundation nomination had arrived 8 months ago. I had not told my mother. The documentation had begun 6 months before the award, not from planning exactly, more from the specific impulse of someone who has spent years working in precision and cannot stop applying precision to even the most personal situations. I had started with memory, not emotional memory, the kind of memory that is organized around feeling, but factual memory, the kind that could be organized into a structure, dates, costs, circumstances, the scholarship I had applied for alone at 17 because there was no parent reviewing the forms, the 3 after-school jobs I had held simultaneously at 16 to save for the car, the university years during which I had received no financial support and had managed on scholarship, work-study, and the specific budgeting discipline of someone for whom the margin between sufficient and insufficient was never comfortable, the graduate program I had funded myself the first year of the firm, the equipment, the software, the shared workspace, the lean months when I had transferred money from savings to operating account, with the specific careful movements of someone managing a thing that could not be allowed to fail. I had organized all of it, not as grievance, as record. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. Grievance was emotional and imprecise and produced the kind of conversations that went in circles. Record was factual and structured and produced the kind of conversations that could only go one direction. I had engaged a financial analyst named Marcus, who did this kind of work for estate and family law cases, to help me build the record into a document. The document was 43 pages. It contained a complete accounting of the financial and material support that a reasonable standard of parental provision would have included across the years of my childhood and young adulthood, adjusted for inflation, cross-referenced against documented expenses I had covered independently, presented as a line-item analysis with supporting documentation where available. At the bottom of the 43 pages was a number, a precise, defensible, fully documented number. Marcus had reviewed it 3 times. My attorney, a measured woman named Constance who had handled my firm's legal work for 4 years, had reviewed it once and said, "This is not a legal document, but it is the most precisely argued personal statement I have ever read. That's all it's meant to be," I said. A statement. "What kind of response are you expecting?" she said. "I'm not expecting a response," I said. "I'm expecting a conversation to finally be honest." My mother found me in the corridor outside the press conference hall. She had moved through the departing crowd with the specific focus of a woman on a mission, and she arrived in front of me with her eyes still wet and her dress slightly displaced from the movement through the room, and her arms already opening. "Simone," she said. The way she said my name, with something in it I had not heard before, something that had been released by the occasion, by the room, by the $2.3 million and the applause and the 40 seconds of her daughter's name in the air. She hugged me. I let her. I stood in her embrace and felt the specific complicated feeling of receiving something you have needed for a long time from someone who has not previously been able to give it, and who is giving it now, in this corridor, these specific circumstances, which told you something important about the nature of the giving. She pulled back. She held my face in her hands the way she had never held my face in my memory. "I am so proud of you," she said. "I have always been so proud of you. You don't know how much I love you. Simone, we love you. We are so sorry for everything. We want to be part of your life. We want—" "Mom," I said. She stopped. I looked at her, 60 years old, crying in a corridor. Gerald and Corey standing a respectful distance behind her with the expressions of men who have been briefed on a situation and are waiting to see how it unfolds. I reached into my bag. I produced the envelope. It was a standard business envelope, cream, sealed, with my firm's return address in the upper left corner and my mother's name and address in the center, in the clean, precise font of someone who had prepared this with the same attention she brought to everything. I held it out. She took it. She looked at it. "What is this?" she said. "Open it when you're ready," I said. "Not here. At home." With time to read it carefully. "Simone, it's not an attack," I said. "I want you to understand that before you open it. It is not written in anger. It is not designed to hurt you. It is a document I spent 6 months preparing because I believe that the conversation we have never been able to have deserves to be had honestly, and honestly means with the full record in front of us." She looked at the envelope. "What's in it?" she said. "A bill," I said simply. Her face moved through several expressions. "Not one I expect you to pay," I said. "I want to be clear about that. I am not asking for money. I am asking for acknowledgement. The bill is the most precise way I know to say, this is what the years cost, this is what I covered, and this is what it looked like from inside it." She was very still. I don't understand, she said. You will, I said, when you read it. Gerald had stepped forward slightly. His expression had the careful quality of a man who has understood that the conversation happening in front of him is not one he is equipped to manage. Simone, he said, tonight is a celebration, whatever issues. Gerald, I said without heat, this is between my mother and me. You've always been between my mother and me when it was inconvenient not to be. Tonight I'm asking you not to be. He stopped. He stepped back. My mother looked at the envelope. She looked at me. I'll read it, she said. Good, I said. Take your time. I'll be available to talk when you're ready. I looked at her, my mother, 60 years old, crying in a corridor on the best night of my professional life, holding 43 pages of everything she had not been there for. Mom, I said, and my voice was even. Not cold, not hot. Simply honest in the way I had been working toward for a very long time. I am glad you came tonight. I genuinely am, and I want you to know that the door is not closed. It has never been closed. But for it to be open in any real sense, for us to be in each other's lives in any way that is actually true, we need to be honest about what happened. All of it, not to assign blame. To simply name it. Finally, after 38 years. She was crying again. I know, she said. I know we failed you. Read the document, I said. Then we'll talk. I hugged her once more, then I excused myself and went back into the hall where my colleagues were waiting, and the moderator wanted a photograph in the evening that had just won me $2. 3 million was still happening and deserved my full presence. She called on a Sunday, 11 days after the press conference. I answered. She had read the document. I could hear it in her voice. Not the performance of emotion from the corridor, but something stripped further back. The voice of a woman who has sat with 43 pages of line items for 11 days and has arrived at the other side of them changed in some way that is not yet fully nameable. The car, she said when I answered. No preamble. The one you bought at 16. I didn't know you bought it yourself. You didn't ask, I said. I thought. She stopped. I assumed her father's family. I've never met my father's family, I said. You know that. A silence. I know, she said. She was quiet for a long moment. The scholarship applications, she said. There are 17 of them in the document. I applied to 22, I said. I included the 17 I have records for. You did all of those alone, she said. Yes, at 17. Yes. The silence stretched. The number at the end, she said. The total. Yes, I said. I can't. She stopped. Simone, I cannot. Mom, I said. I told you in the corridor. I'm not asking you to pay it. The number is not a demand. The number is a translation. It is the 38 years translated into something you can hold and read and understand completely. Because every time I tried to explain it in words, the words didn't land. So I used a language you couldn't misunderstand. A long silence. It's precise, she said finally. I'm an architect, I said. I build things that are precise. She made a sound that was almost, not quite, but almost. A laugh, something in the almost law told me more about the 11 days she had spent with the document than anything she had said directly. What do you want from me? She said. Really, not the document. You. What do you want? I had thought about this for 6 months. I want you to know what it cost, I said. Not so you feel guilty, so you know. So when we talk about my childhood, we're talking about the same thing, the actual thing, not the version that's easier to hold. I paused, and I want going forward a relationship that is honest, that doesn't require me to perform gratitude for attention that arrives only after public success, that is present when the room is empty, not just when the room is applauding. She was quiet. That's fair, she said. I know, I said. I don't know if I know how, she said. I know that too. I said, that's why there's time, that's why the door is still open. I paused, but it opens from honest, Mom. It has always needed to open from honest. That's all the document was. We have been talking since, not easily. Not without the specific difficulty of two people attempting to close a distance that was built over 38 years, in the time that is available after 38 years. But talking. My mother has said things in the conversations since the document that she had not said in the 38 years before it. Things that were specific and accountable and arrived without the performance of the corridor, without the $2.3 million as backdrop. Things that sounded sometimes like someone finally telling the truth about a thing they had been managing for a very long time. Gerald has stayed out of it. Corey called me once, his own call, independent of his parents, and said he had heard about the document and that he thought it was one of the most specific acts of love he had ever encountered, which was a more perceptive observation than I had expected from a 24-year-old. Why love? I said. Because you could have just closed the door, he said. The document means you wanted them to understand enough to try. I thought about that. Yes, I said. That's right. Do you think they can? He said. I thought about my mother's voice on the Sunday call. The almost law at the precision. I think my mother might surprise us both, I said. The $2.3 million sits in a dedicated account, not because I haven't decided what to do with it. I have. A portion into the firm's expansion fund. A portion into the foundation I have been building for 3 years that funds architecture education for students from backgrounds like mine, the ones who do the scholarship applications alone at 17, who buy their own cars at 16, who build everything themselves because building themselves is the only option available. The foundation is called the Ashford Adeyemi Fund, my father's name, my mother's name. Together on something that is entirely mine. I had decided this before the award. I had decided this because the document was not a bill I expected to be paid. It was a record I needed to exist, and the foundation was the answer to the record. Not the answer that required anything from my mother, but the answer that said, the cost of my childhood built something that will change other childhoods. That was the architecture I had been working toward, not the award, not the number at the bottom of the 43 pages. This. Before you go, I need your honest answer in the comments right now. Was the bill the right move, or do you think some debts between parents and children should stay unspoken? This question has no easy answer, and I genuinely want to know where you stand. Tell me right now. The comments are open, and I read every single one. If this story reached something in you, if you have ever built everything yourself while the people who should have helped you watched from a distance and showed up only for the applause, hit that like button so this story finds the people who need it today. Share it with someone who has been waiting for their family to see the real cost of their absence. And if you believe that the most powerful document you can hand someone is the honest truth of what it cost, subscribe, because every week this channel tells the stories of people who were handed nothing and built everything, and the conversations that finally made the record clear. For the ones who did the scholarship applications alone at 17, Audible has your first month completely free. 500,000 stories of people who built from nothing, who named things precisely, who refused to let the cost go unnamed. The link is in the description. Tonight is a good night to start.